Guess what? This upcoming Friday is the beginning of Duckstream 2016, our annual charity live stream, all for the Transactive Gender Center. This is going to be the greatest 48 hours of that weekend. It is going to be fun times gaming for 48 hours on stream. It's me in the West Coast with Brayton and Nick doing goofy shit. And then we got Kole in the Midwest holding it down with Resident Evil, the series of games, going through as many as he can. There are donation incentives. There are things you just get just for doing good and donating to a wonderful, wonderful cause. So please go to Duckfeed.tv/Duckstream and learn about it. Tune in, tell your friends, broadcast it. We'd really, really appreciate it. We're doing our best to make a difference. You can help us. Let's do it.
Some of our landings were desperate adventures. We are now prepared to meet the inevitable counterattacks with power and with confidence.
Oh dear. Another dogged contender. Welcome, unkindled one, purloiner of cinders. Mind you, the mantle of Lord interests me none. The fire-linking curse, the legacy of lords, let it all fade into nothing. You've done quite enough. Now have your rest.
My name is Gary Butterfield.
My name is Kole Ross.
My name is Joshua Garrity.
And you're listening to Bonfireside Chat. It is a Kindled favorite.
Yes, and this week we are talking about the Grand Archives, continuing our siege on Lothric Castle. And as you heard...
And Lothric Boy.
Yep.
Like we're here for the castle, and we're here for the boy.
Yep. Oh, gosh, it's like that song, Don't Take the Boy. Yeah. That's people who listen to country in the early 2000s will know that. Joshua, thank you so much for joining us.
No problem at all. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So you've guessed it before, and people might know you from the Cane and Rinse podcast. Tell us a little bit more about yourself and your history with Souls.
Yeah, so for anyone who didn't listen to the Bloodborne episode I was on, I come from the Cane and Rinse podcast. The Cane and Rinse podcast kind of has a similar concept to Watch Out for Fireballs. We're slightly more... so you guys kind of take your audience through the game moment by moment, whereas we'll kind of talk broadly about gameplay and story in big chunks. So it's a very different style. So if you're a fan of Watch Out for Fireballs, come listen to Cane and Rinse, because it's similar concept but slightly different structure. There's 10 of us now. There's 10 of us on that. See, there's so many of us, I lose count. There's 10 of us on that show, and we have like a rotating host structure. That means that we can kind of cover games that maybe some of the other team members aren't interested in, but also kind of bring in some different opinions and stuff like that, making sure that the podcast isn't just either a hate fest or a love fest, kind of having a more dynamic conversation, and just trying to get as many different voices on the podcast as possible. So as far as Souls goes, I came to Dark Souls quite late. I didn't play it until 2013, and that was because of James's help, actually. James, who you had earlier in the season, he guided me through the early areas of Dark Souls and kind of explained to me the stuff that Dark Souls does a bad job of explaining to you, like humanity and just getting to grips with the structure of the world. But at a certain point, I was like, oh, wait, this is 3D Symphony of the Night. And then from that point onwards, I was okay on my own. And then, I've gone back to play Demon Souls. I've played Dark Souls 2, and obviously Dark Souls 3 and Bloodborne, and I pretty much so I love Dark Souls 1, and I love Bloodborne, and I love Demon Souls. I really like Dark Souls 2, especially post Scholar of the First Sin and the DLC. I think all of that stuff is like some of the best stuff in the series. I have a similar relationship to this game as you guys have expressed throughout the entire season, in that I think Dark Souls 3 is mechanically really satisfying. Most of it, there are some moments that are frustrating, but most of Dark Souls 3 is a mechanical success. But I think I'm even harsher than you guys on the story. I think it's a complete mess. Sorry, fans of the show who get frustrated about the constant ragging on the lore stuff. I'm probably going to contribute to that stuff on this episode. But I think Dark Souls 3 is kind of a failure of narrative, with a few bits peppered throughout that are successful, but mostly it's kind of a mess.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sympathetic to that. Like, even if there are things that I do like, and we'll talk about it in a month or so, but the DLC pissed me off in that respect. Like, I was so publicly skeptical of the Krusty's gonna get here attitude of the DLC, even though I engaged in it, because I couldn't help but this is the company that has literally made the best DLC outside of Throne of Ball, since late 1990s CRPG expansion packs. This is the best DLC ever, and I can't help it but had pretty high hopes. And the DLC underlined a lot, didn't answer things for me and underlined a lot of problems mechanically and narratively for me. So I probably do fall a little bit kinder than it's an absolute train wreck, but I see where you're coming from, and I think that there's a big Venn diagram overlap there. And it's funny because it's something that as I get older and play games more for a podcast or more for examination and stuff, it's super valuable. It starts becoming valuable to me whether I end up thinking something is good or bad. Every once in a while someone will contact us and be like, you guys don't like this game, why are you still doing this? And it's well, it's valuable to learn why you don't like something.
Mm-hmm.
It's absolutely valuable to see the way something can not work too.
Yeah. And I was being very, very harsh there. I think this is very much a game of two halves for me. And I really love one half of it and really dislike the other half. Ultimately, this still, despite all my problems of Dark Souls 3, it's still one of my favorite games of the year that I've played so far. And I think that's just a testament to the kind of base level talent that From Software can, bring to bear. These guys, even when they're off their game, are still better than most people out there. But I think you can't not judge, the series on a curve. And this just, when you compare the just the level of care that went into putting all those details in the world for Lordran in the first Dark Souls, when you feel as you've said over and over again in this season, Gary, there was a sense that you had most of the pieces of the puzzle in Dark Souls 1, even if you didn't have all of them. So you could build this tapestry of a narrative in your mind. Whereas with Dark Souls 3, it's like having a puzzle where there's some random pieces from some other puzzle set. So you can fill out half the puzzle, and then you've got this big chunky piece that doesn't fit anywhere, and you're trying to stick it in, but it doesn't stick in. And then some guy just comes over with a hammer and forces it in and goes, see, it works. It totally works.
I've made a bunch of my own puzzle pieces. I'm sorry they're not regulation, but I think they'll probably fit. I went and bought a jigsaw because of this game.
Yeah.
I'm with you.
Yeah.
There. Let's talk about it, because there's a lot of kind of stuff that relates to all these kind of halves, like the mechanical and narrative half in this area we're talking about today. as the game kind of wraps into a close. Like we're actually pretty close to having done everything.
Yeah, this is rising to a climax.
Yeah. What did we do last time, Cole?
Well, previously, we, as I mentioned before, we laid siege on the kingdom's inner keep, Lothric Castle, under the red sky of this unsettling eclipse that looks like a dark sign. We fought some dragons. We defeated a suit of ancient armor. We looked at some cool-ass butterflies. And now it is time to take this short little detour until we get to the very top of Lothric Castle. And Gary, you're going to notice that I left the lore section here empty because there are only so many times that I can say the royalty has locked themselves away, and a bunch of people are trying to get to them, including you.
There's a little bit. There's some stuff that we'll run into the things that are worth talking about. So like this is a place of scholarship. This is a place where there were scholars that were had connection to Seath, who kind of this is part of the kingdom where that studying happened. So this is where there were scholars from the archives that influenced Osiris. This is there's some statuary that we're going to talk about that suggests some things about that. The scholar that convinced Lothric not to rekindle is presumably from here, is named as but it's such a part of just the castle, like so much so that we literally just kind of go back into the castle.
Right. It's a little bit of a Nightmare of Mensis Murgo's Loft kind of situation.
Yes. Yeah, it's like it's a library in an area we've dealt with.
Yeah, and this is the house of one of the three pillars. Like the scholars are there along, with the knights and the priest.
The hand.
And the hand.
Yeah.
Yes, the secret fourth pillar, the secret hand. So this does kind of stand out, and this is where again where the callback kind of works for me because of that Seath connection, because I have such tremendous affection for the Duke's Archives, which people who play Dark Souls 1 will obviously remember. It's one of the end game areas, and this is very clearly deliberately trying to recall that.
It totally is. I've heard people have made arguments when they're kind of making a kind of a grand argument about Dark Souls 3 not having that many callbacks. Like, oh, it's just a library. It's not like the archives. And it's like, no, like this is very much.
It's called the archives, and it's where you find the crystal stuff.
Yeah, it's very much like a Seath's zone.
Yeah.
And there's a couple other gimmicks to it, but it is like saying that this is not meant to be specifically a callback to the Duke's Archive, I think is willfully kind of obtuse.
Yeah. However, this works for me because it is an architectural one as opposed to just like a straight up, seeing somebody come back, aside from the crystal sage that we see here before. But I like the way the crystal sage is used, so even that gets a little bit of a pass.
For me, this area has just enough new ideas to kind of like give it, I like this area as well. There are a couple of places that kind of fall down for me, but for the most part, I like this area from a gameplay and kind of place in the world perspective. Do you have any kind of like what are kind of first impression or high level thoughts on this, Josh, before we get into the nitty gritty of it?
Yeah. So, like you said, I have very strong feelings towards the Duke's Archives. It's one of my favorite areas. In the original Dark Souls, and I just personally really love that concept of like a hall of learning in video games and just fantasy fiction in general. But one of the things that really struck me about this area is you mentioned the gimmicks, but there are quite a few kind of cool ideas here, and I'm sure we'll talk about them in detail, but I like that it kind of presented you with something really familiar in terms of the layout of the level and kind of the progression of the level, but they really kind of subvert your expectations of certain kind of boss characters and stuff like that, where they reuse a boss in a really clever way, which I'm sure is the first thing we're going to talk about.
Yeah, and that's the fact that it's still introducing these new ideas this late in the game is something that does call back to Dark Souls 1 for me. Like there's a lot of people kind of throw a lot of shade at the second half of Dark Souls 1 where they don't like the areas as much once you get the Lord Vessel, and part of it is they can't ramp up the difficulty because you can visit them in any order. But each of those 4 areas you can go to after you get the Lord Vessel, each has a very distinct kind of like new idea behind it. And that's something I really, really value. And this area kind of calls back to that. Like as much as, Lothric Castle was kind of just a castle. It was a cool castle, but it was just kind of like a fortified area that you're making your way into. We've done that a bunch of times. This is introducing kind of fresh gimmicks, not just for the game, but for the series, this late in the game. And I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
And it's that, so before we actually head up there, we come from this is the famed bonfire you can see from another bonfire thing, where there's we finish the Dragon Slayer. It gives us a bonfire because every boss does that, and then you go through this bridge. If we kind of look around a little bit, we can see there's a bridge above us, which ultimately goes back into the castle. That's where we're going. And these primordial serpents statues. We're gonna see a lot of these things, kind of in different different configurations here.
Yeah.
But we see them this early.
Yeah. The primordial serpents obviously being kind of the secret puppet masters behind the events of Dark Souls 1, particularly Kingseeker Frampt, and then Darkstalker Kath, the very goofy kind of rabbit dragon kind of dudes who pop up, snore, have bad breath, and weird little lip flaps that look like mustaches.
Yes. And Kath is associated in this game with the Sable Church of Londor, in something that we all thought was going to be explained in the DLC. That wasn't, and maybe will be in the second DLC when Krusty finally gets here. We'll get that explanation, but maybe not. But you can literally see the bonfire from here. This bothers me less than other people. It bothers other people. I feel like bonfire density is not something that gets on my nerves when levels are designed around it.
Right.
And the frequency of this area actually is really, really good with shortcuts and the like. This is a pretty well designed level, and does not have frequent bonfires. It's just this one right here, which, I didn't miss having to run that extra 30 yards. This did not bother me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we get here and there's a body lying in front of the gate. And this is kind of important because if you kill the dancer early, this is as far as you can get.
Right.
In the level. And because this gate is just locked. However, a corpse just kind of appears here in one of the sloppier gatekeeping things.
Right.
That happens here. We talked about the teleport a lot after the Profaned Capital. This is kind of a goofy, you can move forward now. And this is an important character.
Yes.
This is actually a specifically Gothard.
Yeah.
How do you say this?
I say Goddard. Does that sound right to you, Joshua?
Yeah, that sounds correct.
Yes.
It's probably better than Gotthard.
Right.
Because he's not an energy drink. He's not a male enhancement pill. He should have it. It's probably Goddard.
Yeah. So there's I've seen 2 different things. So either this is Goddard because it's holding the key that is attributed to Goddard and carrying Goddard's twin swords. Also, if you look at the corpse, it has sheaths for different kinds of swords than we've seen Goddard using. So it could be one or the other. I like it being Goddard just because we know that he's a solid bro. But he was, kind of fleeing when he knew stuff was going bad to the archives, which he knew was safe.
Yes, and was killed by something.
Right.
When I first got here, I thought it was somebody who threw themselves off the roof.
Oh yeah.
And I was like, oh, that's kind of weird. I don't really like how this is triggered, but if people are literally killing themselves,
yeah,
it's what's going on behind this door.
It's the eclipse has started and all of a sudden, shit's going Jonestown,
Yeah. And I kind of liked that. Now I don't really know why he's here. But he is the King's Black Hand. He's the head of his kind of Assassin's Guild or his KGB
yes,
or whatever.
The Hunters.
Yes.
If you look at the Hunter's Ring, it talks about the Black Hand being those. Something that's kind of informed here just by the key that we've seen is that the Grand Archive sealed itself up once the Pus of Man started invading the Wall of Lothric. However, we've never seen the Pus of Man actually trying to make an attack on anything. So I guess I get it, but we just haven't seen it.
Yeah, and this could be to protect. I mean, it's kind of it doesn't seem like this should be the only way to get to the prince. You know,
Right.
like you have to go through this. It's like getting a 2-bedroom or like a 2-bathroom apartment where you have to go through one of the rooms to get to the bathroom,
Oh yeah.
you know, or something like that. Like it seems like this is not the only way to get there, but if it is, you know, they could be protecting the prince
Mhm.
from this spreading corruption. But yeah, so we get in here into this kind of lobby area, and this is where we're introduced to like what the aesthetic of this area. Like the books check them out, kind of thing.
Books,
there.
really? Books check them out.
That's what I like to call it. Books check them out.
Yeah, no,
Like the
I'm
book
just,
check. That's what it's the books check them out archives.
yeah, no, I'm just picturing like that's like a poster, right? That you saw in a
Yeah.
library once. Okay.
Oh, that's an old like old campaign about books.
Oh.
Like book awareness for
Yeah.
kids. Media, movies, you watch them good. Movies, just watch them good.
Books are like movies for your mind.
Action figures, play with them with your hands. Food with your mouth.
My slogan is instructions.
So books check them out is the name of the game. As you're introduced to our old friend, Crystal Sage 2, which we knew he had a brother or a twin or what have you. I think that an earlier item description associated with the first Crystal Sage mentions that there are multiple Crystal Sages.
Yes. So there was one who fled to Farron in order to kind of teach them their ways, and one that stuck around in the Grand Archives in order to inform the magic there.
Yes. And this is the trope of a boss character being kind of demoted to mini boss
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Demoted to like environmental threat. I really like this game of cat and mouse with this guy.
Yeah, agreed. I think it's one of the more successful little set pieces in Dark Souls 3. Just, you know, running up to him and getting as many slashes in before he disappears somewhere else, and kind of working out this route to his second location or third location. It was really fun. It's one of the rare occasions where Dark Souls 3 is trying to make something tactically interesting rather than frustrating, because I didn't find this difficult. This encounter's fairly easy. I mean, easy on the Dark Souls scale, but yeah, it's just really fun to chase him through this building and kind of work out the best route to get to him. I think it's a clever piece of design, using the environment and an enemy in unison to create a really clever little set piece.
Yeah. The sense that I get is that I'm fighting somebody who's really competent and also on their own turf.
Yeah. It's a real spin because there are new ideas here. This is a new spin on channelers, which were the other archives things, which also harried you with magic missiles and teleported around.
Mm-hmm.
But it's what if a channeler was, much tougher, had a much expanded move set, to this. Like the first time I ran into this guy, I actually saw, or this, not the first time, this last time when I was playing for a review, I had something that never happened before, which the second time I ran into him, which hasn't come up yet, but I'll bring it up now while we're talking about him. He was using exclusively melee, and that's never happened to me before. I've never seen a Crystal Sage's melee attack. I know the other one can do it as well.
Yeah.
And he's not like strong in melee, but it was so shocking and weird that it actually like took me by surprise, and I ended up having to like roll away and regroup and everything, which was super cool. And that's something that like the channelers will like try to whack you and stuff, but I feel like they're just not as unpredictable as this guy is.
Yeah.
In that respect. So pretty cool. And just having him disappear and just kind of like is really effective.
Yeah.
And it gets you, the big thing is, you're going to have these magic missiles coming from up above. It gets you looking at the verticality of the space and gets you kind of trying to wrap your mind around how this place is laid out.
Yep.
Because, and this is not a serious criticism, but like, boy, does this not seem like a place people would actually like be around and how it's laid out. Like the Grand Archive or the Duke's Archives was like 2 big halls full of books with some stairs. I'm like, okay, this seems like a thing. This is this winding, ridiculous like double back nightmare with just some rooms are just featureless. They don't have books. They're just like little passages and stuff. Like this does not feel like the sense of place is not important to this place, and it's fine that it doesn't have that.
Yeah.
But it needs to do something to get you kind of looking around, because this is not going to be laid out like a place people would live or actually work.
Yeah, they're definitely propping up the scan cohesion with atmosphere.
Yes,
Is the sense that I get here, and it's fine. Like I think that this is actually very well designed from a play standpoint. But like
it's great.
The second that you think that this is that you start looking at this as a logical space, it completely falls down. And our good old friend the astrolabe comes back.
Finally.
Yep,
I missed you, baby.
We have astrolabes, and we've got telescopes. Like they brought some friends.
Like the weird kids from across the street. I'm a compass. Get out of here, go back to protractor land.
Yeah, everybody thinks I'm a protractor, but
I'm really a compass, huh? Leave. So get all kinds of dork tools hanging out here. And one of the things, again, just some sugar talking about Dark Souls 3, the enemy we're introduced here are these the little God, what are they called? The little slaves. The little,
the undead thralls.
Yeah, the thralls. Which, like, something that we talked about this when we just did the Resident Evil episode for Watch Out for Fireballs, but like I love when a video game makes an enemy scale. Because these were some of the first enemies we fought way back in the Undead Settlement, and they are still a threat here. And like, yes, they're buffed, but they are more of a threat because of layout and ambush and things like that than they are just having, just being a tougher version, like being a gray ogre or Groger in Final Fantasy terms.
They were always able to cling to surfaces, like even going back to like Undead Settlement or what am I thinking of here? The Cathedral of the Deep, especially here. It's especially striking to like just look up at these massive bookcases and just see them just like waiting in ambush for you. Like it feels like they come out of nowhere. It's like, no, they're actually just like just biding their time. They filed themselves under D for death from above.
Yep. I like the idea of that being their job when they are here too. Like, because there are a couple of like stairs and ladders that like will go up to books, but there isn't a whole, there isn't an infrastructure for reaching a lot of the books in this. So you have these little guys that climb up, and you can just be like, "Get me this." And he climbs up the wall, grabs the book, and climbs back down.
It's a library staffed entirely by the gymnast from Ocean's 11.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. So I like those guys. We kind of make our way around, and they actually got me too. Like, I think as far as enemies in this area, up until you get to the last half, like the other enemy we run into with significance here is not really a threat.
Right.
I died from thralls more than those guys until you actually get to the rooftops and things get serious.
Right.
Yeah.
So we work our way into this kind of dark, moody, atmospheric area, and we see kind of at the end of this hallway, this kind of grim procession of these kind of like priestly enemies in these robes. And we can see that they've got kind of this white substance all over them. And this is our introduction to the Grand Archive Scholars. And when I saw their attacks and when I saw this whole wax kind of thing, I think that I texted you, Gary, like this, like it felt like we were just, somebody was designing us, like trying to bait us into talking about body fluids.
Oh yeah. Like there are a lot of people listening to the show who don't listen to our other shows.
Right.
And we have a show called Abject Suffering, and like, cum comes up a whole lot.
Right.
Well, I mean, just
go back and listen to the the Scott and David. Episode. Like that was a part of the Summer of Cum as well.
That's that's the summer we'll never forget. The but it is like that's what, and they literally make spray for days. Like it is they skeet attack. Like it's amazing. It's like Little John.
Oh man, it's weird that they're not climbing up the walls because they're Spider-Manning everything.
And like even if you're not taking like the body fluid thing, like these guys are really into their wax play. Like it's just like I know some people like having a little bit of wax from a candle, but imagine you're having relations with one of these guys and they bring out like an iron bucket full of
like
scalding hot wax
candle.
and they're just like dunk me like dunk me now. It's just oh god. And like I'm just picturing like these these wax boys are just having fun, and then you come along and I'm just imagining like if I hadn't turned up, would these guys still be in their robes? Is that like, have I interrupted a party here? That's yeah, but anyway,
I can't
back
tell
on
if your eyes
track.
are wide shut. The wax is obscuring them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe it was basic instinct, but the first time I saw somebody like dump some wax on some dude's nipple, I think it might have been that. And it is very funny to imagine, like, Sharon Stone or whatever dipping a little of the wax and the guy like being like, he's blindfolded and he's like, oh, and then he just goes in back and just starts pulling out like candle after candle, just like a big pile, and then just a blowtorch and just starts melting wax, like
just wax boards them.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh gosh. So there's something that kind of came up to me for this. So remember way back to Demon Souls, the Maiden in Black, kind of going with the motif of any of the kind of Shrine Maiden kind of people, wasn't able to see, but that's because her eyes were occluded with wax.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if that has any relationship to this, because it's fun to imagine that this is some kind of kinky fetish play, but they're actually serving a purpose, or this wax serves a purpose, because they're kind of doing this to inoculate themselves against this danger that they've surrounded themselves with. Almost like this gives them their power and also protects them from the danger that power can unleash, right?
I don't know if the wax gives them. I mean, it gives them power because they can shoot wax, but like dipping a head.
Oh, I mean,
this,
the power to like read and interpret these. Oh gosh,
yeah,
the text and stuff like that,
like to
do their job.
Yeah. I don't. I mean, I bet you it doesn't have anything, because like Hawkeye Goff also had his eyes occluded by wax.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it means any. I don't think there's a relation.
Okay, it came to me. I hadn't even thought about it before I started speaking.
No. I mean, there is something to like. I think that because if you look at the purposes of the wax, like for Goff and for Maiden in Black, it is like to blind them.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to like be super stretchy, you can say like, oh, they're being blinded to the dark side of the tomes of like what they're reading.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're not, and that's symbolized by the little hand, like curse hand stuff that we'll talk about in a minute. So like kinda. But the functions are so different that like if it's a like an homage, or if there's a connection, it's not like a hard like this is what wax does in this world.
Yeah.
It's more just kind of like a poetic, like they're like echoes. It's like poetry.
Yeah.
I think that's the it's one of those style things as opposed to something that's actually interesting or useful cosmology of the world.
Yeah.
But it like that is what's happening, and the fact that you can do this yourself. So like after you kill these guys, and they're easy, they're like low level caster enemies,
right?
Go down in a couple of hits.
But boy, do they have a lot of souls. It's kind of crazy.
Do they?
Yeah. If you wanted to like farm these guys, you totally could.
I've never farmed them.
Yeah.
That's interesting. The when I first came up to this like wax pit, and it like, what is the prompt? Is it dunk head?
It's like dip head in wax is literally what it says. Mister, you're turning yourself into a candle.
Yeah. I delight.
Yeah.
Like I just, and then when you do it and you get the same head that they have, and I'm like, I have like, and it took me an embarrassing long time to figure out what it did.
Uh-huh.
And I was just like, this is so good. Like, why wouldn't I be a wax boy for this like fun wax adventure? Like, I'll join these guys. These guys seem cool. I like the fact that you could do it yourself was delightful to me, for reasons I can't quite explain.
I mean, it's kind of in the same vein as curl up into ball.
Yeah.
To pretend to be an egg. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like doing something explicitly very silly in these games is very like, is refreshing.
Yeah.
Like, and it's so silly.
I have to admit, when I played this originally, I had no idea you could do this. So I went through the entirety of this section, just panically running through these ghostly hands, not knowing that there was a counter to it this entire time that I was just completely ignoring. And finding that out after the fact was a real, head slap moment, because these hands were a real problem for me throughout this entire level. Not like unmanageable. I was able to get through, and I don't think they're frustratingly difficult to deal with. But if I had known that I could just, dunk my head in some wax, and I'm a-okay. I don't have to panic through this section of the game. I would have loved to have known that, but I just, guys, my first instinct isn't to stick my head in a huge vat of wax. I associate that with pain and suffering. So that wasn't my first instinct. But yeah, unfortunately, I made this section of the game difficult for myself.
I'll admit, I kind of worried that there was going to be some kind of like big waxy hands that like reached out and grabbed me. Like that was going to be like a real sucker kind of thing. But I mean, Dark Souls does instant death, but that'd be just like a bit too much. But I had that moment of hesitation. But like you watch them do it, and it's just kind of like, oh, okay. Like they're demonstrating it, which I think is neat. But I don't blame anybody for thinking that just it not occurring to them to go check this out.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I admit that I was emboldened by the fact that there was a bonfire like pretty recently.
Oh yeah.
But I mean, it could have been like, oh, you come back with half your health. Like it could have been like a curse situation or something like that. And I'm glad it wasn't. I just kind of rolled the dice. Like, these guys seem like cool dudes. It was like literally my thought process behind that. There's also a much tougher enemy here, another Lothric Knight. These are not the same ones as the red-eyed ones we just dealt with. These guys do a crystal buff on their stuff if you let them. And they are not nearly as hard as the Red-Eyed Knights with the healers, I think.
Right.
Yeah.
It also helps that at least here you're not encountering a whole bunch of them at once.
Yeah.
Like they're not escalating each of these things. But yeah, like the one that you find here, kind of like back around in the stacks, he's a Thrustulon. Like he has a spear, which is pretty difficult, especially when kind of paired up with his shield bash that all these guys have. Yeah. Back here, you find the Crystal Chime, which is, again, one of these hybrid casting items. You can cast both miracles and sorceries. The story beat for this is that this belonged to Gertrude, the kind of heretic daughter, or maiden rather, who kind of inspired this whole kind of sect that is attacking Lothric from within.
The war with the angels.
Yes.
And we're going to get more to her. Her pretty soon. There are a lot of crystal lizards here. Just kind of, anywhere that's associated with crystals is going to have crystal lizards. They tend to be in, kind of trap locations here as well.
Yeah.
And and so the books that we mentioned have these little like curse hands coming out of it that are kind of like pretty silly looking, I think.
Yeah.
In a way that like I'm not used to. Like I like when things look kind of silly in these games, and this kind of hits that for me. Like they look like they're from like a Zelda game or something.
Yeah, they look kind of like epic Mickey things.
Yeah, that's like these things they're refugees from Kingdom Hearts. Like if they were black colored, it'd be like, oh, this is on the island of Misfit Books and some fucking stupid game that I don't care about.
Were they like, oh god, the plot is getting too convoluted in this series. Let's go over to a series with a nice clear. Oh no!
Oh god, what'd you do?
Two series of nice clear timelines. 365 divided by 2 days. So they look really silly. Mechanically, I like them though. Once with the wax, or you have this kind of limited time immunity, kind of recalls New Londo Ruins, where you can get past these guys. Otherwise, you can just make a run. They hurt you a little bit. They build up curse relatively quickly,
right?
But until later, like early on, they're not really a problem. But they actually ramp up the complexities pretty well. And when they start introducing books that have been left out on the floor, and that's really like a devious trap that I really love. Like there's a part that gets me every single time where like I run in to get some treasure, I get fairly cursed, and I start running out. Thinking like, okay, I'm clear, and then there are some books on the floor, and I have to run a little bit further than I think.
They pop up like spears from the floor in an Indiana Jones movie.
Yeah.
This is so the way they introduce these, or at least when they first got me, like you're in this dark room, and like at the very opposite end, next to this lever, is a body with a glowing item on it. And you think, okay, well, I'm going to go up here. It'll probably be a shitty little soul, and that's fine, whatever. You pick it up, and that puts you right in range for the first one of these to grab you. Like that is a wonderful little ambush that they set up.
when you say grab, it's just like they just kind of paw you, right? Like, is there an attack?
There's no, there's no. They're incorporeal, so they can't like bind you, but like they're reaching and grasping is what it looks like.
Yeah, I just thought maybe there was like a attack I didn't see.
Oh yeah, like if you hung around.
Yeah, they just kind of Misa you. They just kind of paw at you.
Yeah.
Paw at you gently.
Yeah. Joshua, so like that would change like the entire texture of this level if you were just trying to like rush past these guys. Like, did the curse bite ring help you at all? Like, did you just try and like retool to be as curse resistant as possible? Because like curse it's bad news in this game.
Yeah. I did end up using the curse bite ring and stuff like that, but ultimately that there are paths that you can take where your kind of curse build-up is at a minimum. And for me, it kind of just became about learning those pathways and navigating those narrow... there were basically these narrow walkways between bookcases where if you ran through them, it wasn't that big a problem. And and it gets worse the closer you are to the bookcase. So as long as you're kind of just from, poking distance, you're pretty okay. But yeah, I wish I knew about the head dunking thing, but I never found this frustrating. Mainly because I think the game does a good job of. I think it does a good. I'm going to say it does a good job of telegraphing these things, but then not really being able to explain why. I always just had a good instinct for when this was going to happen. It just there might be a subtle kind of cue in terms of the art direction on which bookcases trigger it, but I kind of felt like I knew which ones to avoid and so forth and so on. I think it's totally doable, but I wouldn't recommend it if you're looking to do like a challenge run or anything like that.
I may be off base here, but it feels like there's a little bit of anticipation on their attack too. Like I don't think it kicks in right away. I think the hands will appear, like reel back and then kind of reach out, and I think that there's enough to like if you want to roll out of the way or get your distance, you have a brief window for it.
I don't know if they actually draw back, but there is a slight delay between when the hands eject and the damage and curse starts.
Mm-hmm.
So there's like a beat.
Yeah.
Of like, oh, something's happening, and then you can get out of there. Which like that could have been way harsher, and I'm kind of surprised that it's not. The fact that none of us three actually had very much of a problem with these things. They were just kind of a fun hazard to avoid, as opposed to like, Jesus Christ, fucking curse. Shows like. A good design, I think.
Yeah, they used a light touch, which is nice. And also like a cursed book that literally kills you by being near it will always work.
Yeah,
not just for us, it will always work.
It'll always curse. It's a little bit on the nose, like the idea of them literally like the haunted knowledge within these things is actually ghost arms.
Yep.
A little bit. There's a lever here that you can unlock to get to a secret area that I find frustrating, where you get the witch's locks, which is a whip made of the hair of the witch of Isleth, and the power within. So why? Like what? Why do we need a connection to Isleth here? Like again, just the thing. Oh, a big cork board full of threads with just connections that don't lead to anything. Like there's a heavy Isleth presence here in a hidden room. Why?
All that I can think of is this is like a reliquary almost, and that pyromancy is kind of maybe forbidden or something like that. We know that Lorien, the older brother of Lothric, went and slayed the demon prince or something like that. And that maybe this was kind of part of the spoils of that, possibly. And where else to store mythical, powerful artifacts than amongst the other mythical powerful artifacts? That's all I can think of.
I think that would make more sense to me if this was like some kind of lab or something like that, where they're just kind of collecting these artifacts from distant parts of the world and kind of keeping them all together along with these dark experiments going on. But this is a library. This is just books, and I just don't think it really makes sense here.
Yeah,
because we find scrolls and stuff, which makes sense, like that kind of thing makes sense. But finding weapons in the closed stacks like doesn't. doesn't make very much sense. And if what, I'm not saying you're necessarily wrong, Cole, but like,
Yeah.
I would have loved something in the description that said like this was brought back from the pilgrimage of like, Lorien's pilgrim. Like, it's not like we couldn't have used more background on that trip that Lorien took. Instead, it just means like, oh, like now Izalith is in play, in addition to Seath, in addition to Lothric, in addition to the dragons,
and the profane
in
flame.
addition
Don't
to
forget
the
about
profane
that.
flame,
Yep.
like in addition to the serpents, in addition to like it just goes on and on and on, and like there's no addition by subtraction in this game. There's no like focus, and like that. This is one of those things where it's like, is it ultimately a big deal? No. But as a cumulative thing of just every area having connections to every other thing, it grinds my gears a little bit.
Yeah.
You couldn't have found a better place for this. Like you couldn't have tied it in better. Like, so gears mildly, I don't want to, trigger an appearance by the torqued off gamer, like my werewolf, like alter ego that just screams about, screams about games for 9 minutes on YouTube. But like, this is my little torque meter goes up a little bit about this.
Yeah.
And putting a viable whip this late in the game is frustrating too. As somebody who enjoys whips and whip fests, I would like to have a better whip a little bit early. Like, you can't get, like, if this wasn't blocked off after you killed the dancer, maybe you could make a run and actually do a Witch's Locks run of the game.
Yeah.
As is, like, this is just for the item description. Like, no one's ever going to use this thing.
Yeah.
At least for PvE. Maybe it's useful for PvP, but no.
It looks really cool if you watch a video of its weapon art. Like, it's pretty nifty. But
yeah, and it's made of human hair, which is kind of cool and gross. Yeah. Essentially just a dreadlock.
Oh, God, stop it, Gary.
Don't say dreadlock.
Hair is so gross.
Yeah.
There's so as you emerge from this dark room, you can kick a ladder down for just a small little shortcut. There's only one bonfire in this area, the one outside the front gate. Everything is instead of finding another bonfire, you just find a quicker way back down to the first floor.
Yeah. And they're meaningful shortcuts.
Yeah.
Like, each one you can find, I think, is actually pretty good.
And if you want to do some rolling, you can get the Avalon again, kind of echoing the placement of the Avalon in Dark Souls 1.
Yeah. Up to the second level, the middles here. This is where we're going to get attacked by the Sage again. There are more of these wax-headed dudes and more book. Like, it's kind of everything that we saw in the first level. Like, this is in some ways, like, there's some negativity here, but some pretty classic game design, because I do feel like they've introduced all of these threats individually, kind of slowly on the first level. And then literally as you go up to the second level of the archives, everything is kind of ramped up in new configurations. So you're still just running into the same enemies, lots of thralls, the Crystal Sage, lots of Candle Scholars, but they are in different configurations and there are more of them. It's like, what if there are thralls by some books? They're going to try to lure you in, or what if there are, a Crystal Scholar at the top of a set of stairs, plus some thralls on top of a set of stairs throwing, fire bombs at you with one above him on the wall. Like, this is very ambush heavy and very small, compact configurations of enemies you kind of have to approach like a puzzle, which are some of my favorite Dark Souls things that can happen.
Yeah.
And you're also encouraged to keep moving through a lot of it because of the curse books. So if you didn't stock up on immunity, like, you can stop and kind of smell the roses, but you're constantly being harried as well by the curse books and by the Crystal Sage zapping you from a distance. So there's a really nice kind of, I feel like, balance between like driving you forward into ambushes that kind of happens continuously through this middle stretch.
Yeah. No, you summed it up. Like, I really enjoy the fact that you feel so exposed when you're up here, and those stairways actually become these really effective choke points for the enemies. Like, there are several times where just like, oh, they're like, I was focused on the caster, and then I just was ambushed. Like, things got out of hand quickly in a way that I couldn't spot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There's a weird little so there's a couple hidden levers here. One that leads to a Titanite slab, which is likely your first one. But the more kind of important one leads to there's an illusory wall that you can get through that leads to an Outrider Knight. Which I don't like fighting these things.
Nope.
In their puffed up like late game super HP, unlimited stamina versions. That emanate frostbite.
Yeah.
I do not like fighting this thing. This thing is harder than the boss for me in this area.
And why is it here?
Yeah.
Sullivan sending out scouts. Like, did you know we know where he's born? Sullivan sending out scouts, I guess. But I have no idea why this one specifically is here.
Yeah. Shrug. You get his armor. I like their armor a lot.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And we find a spell here, like kind of nearby on this walkway here that is significant.
Yes. Soul Stream, which it's just a rapid fire soul missile kind of thing, but the description says that this is kind of where some of Prince Lothric's doubts came from.
Yeah. So Soul Stream isn't the rapid fire small
okay.
thing. This is the big mega beam.
Okay. Yeah.
The super blast. Like, this is the coolest looking sorcery in the game, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And is can actually has very, very like long wind up, but if you get hit by it, it is pretty rough and is kind of used. I've seen it on videos, like kind of used in PvP to good effect if you can like distract an enemy or in like ganks, essentially.
Yeah.
Like, if an enemy doesn't know this is coming, this is bad news. And the lore here is interesting because the first of these scholars, when Lothric and the Grand Archives were but young, the first scholars doubted the linking of the fire and was alleged to be a private mentor to the royal prince. Mm-hmm. So like, is Aldia? Like, dude, like that's I've seen that around. Like, this is possibly where Aldia went. I don't think there's enough support for it, but like I'm desperate for Aldia.
I know where Aldia went. I killed them.
Yeah. So, well, you don't have to though. So like, people show up where they're not mandatory deaths. So like, but this could possibly that could be because Aldia was not a big fan of linking of the fire. Mm-hmm. It's possible that he moved on and and it doesn't have his like kind of energy signature at all. Mm-hmm. Like he was a root fire guy. He didn't shoot sorceries.
Right.
So like it's a stretch, but it's possible. Like the word choice could be meaningful. It might also not be, again, translated thing, but the first of the scholars, and doubting the fire, like it's possible that is an explicit Dark Souls 2 connection.
Yeah.
Do not know, but possibly.
I had a tickle of that in the back of my mind, but just there aren't enough nouns, I think. Yeah.
And there's not like one other supporting piece of, evidence for it, which would be like what I would want, I guess. Yeah. So, I don't necessarily think it was. It's just kind of a thought that crossed my mind when I first picked it up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So around this point, we get to a bridge, and this is where the final confrontation with the Crystal Sage takes place.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Joshua, like, did you take this guy down here? Like, did you post up and fight?
Yeah, absolutely. And to be honest, by that point, I had gotten down to very little health, so it was kind of just walking up to him, slashing a couple of times, and then he was dead. But yeah, I mean, I think it's a great conclusion, really, and I loved what he added to the levels below and all of that stuff. That's it, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. It's good. It's good to finally put this guy behind you. He does not respawn. His health does refill if you die. But you can, once you take him out, he's gone.
Right.
And he gives you the Crystal Scroll, which gives you Logan's sorceries, which is different from the scroll we got in the Profane Capital that gives you Logan's sorceries. So it is, again, just connections.
Yep. And very different than the Crystal Skull, which cuts up the inside of your lip.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And disappoints you as a 26-year-old man. So I mean, and that's really it for this inside section. There's just kind of more of the same, more ambushes, more kind of like tricky bits, with you kind of being zapped from afar.
Did either of you have trouble with the kind of room that with a crowd of 3 of the Candlecaster guys? With
the 3 rows or the 4 rows of books.
Yeah.
Not and the one covering it from above.
Mhm.
Not particularly. I don't know if it's my specs, but these guys never did enough damage to be a threat. Like anytime I got hit, it was like 15% of my health or something like that, and it's just I could tank these guys for a long time if I had to.
It was a problem for me if they fired off the correct combination of spells at once. Like this was a little bit of a, I think I died here like once or twice, especially when you are climbing up the ladder there.
Oh yeah. Josh, did you have any issue with that?
No, not really at all. I think there were loads of instances with these ambushes where it racked up the tension. I felt like suddenly very fragile for brief periods, but it never got to the point where I was overwhelmed. Not this point either. I feel the need to kind of point this out now. We've kind of been hinting at it, but like this whole area for me, up until we get to the NPC guys, this whole area is kind of a testament to making. And Gary, you've said that this is something that you love already, but using really weak enemies to just create a nice even tension throughout the whole thing. Never like this kind of reminds me a little bit of like Resident Evil 4's kind of philosophy to game design, where it's never about kind of it never wants to overwhelm you. It never wants to make you feel completely out of control. It just wants you to feel like you're slightly having to swerve incoming traffic to get out of the way and safely. It's a really fine line they walk with this whole area with the enemy placements and stuff. But I really do think this is one of the most successful kind of pieces of game design in the whole of Dark Souls 3, and it's a highlight for the series for me. I'm really glad you guys actually got me on for this section of the game, because I was really worried that for any kind of section you brought me on for Dark Souls 3, I was just going to be a moany so and so just discussing all the
hey, no
all
need
the
for that
aspects
language, buddy.
Whoa,
Tone it down a bit.
But
you don't have to fly off the handle, okay?
Thankfully, I think apart from when we get to the princes, which I actually think is really successful narratively, there's not much in the way of narrative to really kind of cling on to here, which I can perceive as a weakness, but every other time Dark Souls 3 is really either heavily invested or in the story, or it promises it will be but then isn't, it's disappointing. So for this whole area to kind of be mostly just a mechanical exercise kind of feels like it's focusing on the strong point of Dark Souls 3, which is these mechanical encounters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's a little bit of, we're going to get to the stuff with Gertrude that is related to this, which is like, I'll admit to being a little tantalizing, as being kind of details to a story that I still feel is incomplete. It's still something that ultimately doesn't add up to enough for me. But I find actually kind of, if there's something that like is going to be the redeeming factor of the story kind of part of this, it is the princes, like you mentioned, which like I love. That's that's my favorite boss fight in this game. And then the stuff with Gertrude is pretty interesting and kind of evocative once we get to it.
Yeah.
But the weird thing is that's just kind of part of Lothric. The actual stuff that is related to the archives themselves, I agree with you, are kind of a misfire. So yeah. And this game also, or this area, as much as I think that it does ride that difficulty balance really well, is going to have a couple of pretty obnoxious spikes kind of coming up.
Yeah.
Specifically, like the one encounter I think is like, or two things I definitively think are kind of too much. So we're now in like rooftop zone. Like we leave, it's like Canehurst or like, Anne Orlando or what have you. We're out on the roofs trying to make our way back into the building higher up. And gargoyles start popping up from the profaned capital.
Yep. And one of them, again, they're luring you out with souls. You're going for one, and then just boom, and then it leaps up and attacks you.
Yep.
And I think that you can get like 4 of them on your tail. as you're
if you're running,
going
like,
across. Yeah.
yeah, like these guys are not to be ran away from because they have a long leash and like they move pretty quick. There's also, we overlook this little area full of Corvians because of course there have to be
I
Corvians
forgot
in the
about
thing
it. Yeah.
too.
I didn't find the Corvians.
Connections,
Where are they
connections,
at?
connections. You walk, when you first leave out onto the roof, if you look to your right, you overlook a little like landing down there, and there's a Corvian storyteller telling stories to like 4 Corvians. It's really a tough encounter. They are, all of them at once is a bit too much. I can't remember exactly what's down there. I didn't go down this time because I went down once and died, and then I was like, I don't need to do this, because it's frustrating. But I couldn't. If you put a gun to my head, I couldn't tell you why Corvians are here.
Right.
So,
and even with the extra information that we have about Corvians, it still doesn't shed any light on why they end up where they end up.
The DLC sheds no light on the main game.
Right.
Like, and that's the big failing of it, is that like we learned a lot of trivia about things we know in the main game, but nothing that is significant. Yeah. And knowing more about the Corvians' backstory does not reflect on what their place is in the actual main game at all. And that's the end kind of frustration of that DLC. Not a spoiler for like a month from now when that episode comes out, I guess. But so yeah, there's some Corvians. We're having connections to the profane capital because of connections. We go back in to the thing, and there actually is one of those like serious knights, like a red-eyed Slashulon here, who is pretty tough. You can avoid him. He's looking out over the library. He looks kind of like significantly placed. I'm not sure why, but I like literally snuck past him this last time. Like you just kind of like ding 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 ding, and to get out to what I think is like the one pretty frustrating too hard encounter in the game, or in this level,
right
here on this kind of courtyard that is full of interesting statuary.
Oh yeah.
That we should talk about before we talk about this fight.
We really should. There's a central statue here, which is of a praying figure that kind of has what appears to be either like small spikes coming off of it, or it looks like it is coated in wax. Not the statue itself, but it is a statue of somebody who is coated in wax or crystal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There are also, this is where we're going to have a real density of serpent statues. Yep. And the little Cath and or Framp statues have wings. Which, is this the angels? Like maybe. Like I don't know what like that makes sense to me.
Yeah.
That these are, even though like if the idea was angels were a heresy in Lothric and were kind of hidden, it seems like they wouldn't make it past the statues, up to the statue stage.
Right.
So I don't know why there are statues, like having one of these in Gertrude's cell, or like opening up a secret, like this would have been a good thing for that secret passage. Instead of some Isolus shit, have a bunch of angel stuff in there. And it's like, whoa, because before when we ran into the angel painting on the way here, it was behind a hidden wall.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, this signifies like, this is kind of hidden. We know that Lothric, angels are controversial in Lothric. This is kind of a hidden thing. Here they're just out on Front Street if these are supposed to be the angels. So I don't get it. Like, I don't understand why, where they actually fall in this culture if, with all of our previous information.
Yeah. Maybe there was a rogue sculptor who took advantage of the chaos to go around.
to go and sculpt some things real quick.
Just it's a Banksy of chiseling instead of tagging.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I didn't even think about that.
Some 18-year-old art student going, oh, I know what will be edgy. I'll just put up some angels everywhere. That will piss the man off.
If it was Banksy, I mean, maybe what it is, because I was gonna say if it was Banksy, he'd put little devil horns on the angels. But what if they were just statues of the serpents, and then the Banksy of Lothric put the wings on them?
Oh yeah.
It's like it's ironic. It's like, what if Mickey Mouse had like a Adolf Hitler mustache or something? Like that. That's the kind of art we're working with here. Like, whoever the Lothric piss Christ bandit. So
I agree. The ontology of these guys is baffling and unsatisfying. Like, it's striking to see them and to see that they're kind of in play. I've read some very let's just say their reaching is extensive. I've read some theories that this entire thing, what we think is the real world, is an illusion that is kind of propagated by the serpents, with the help of the Sable Church, and trying to get us to avoid rekindling the flame or something like that. Like that is I think the most extreme version of this that I've read, and that like them popping up here is like a sign that like, hey, there's, you know, you're being manipulated again by these guys. But again, it's one of those things where like I appreciate the amount of work that goes into those theories. I just can't meet you there.
Yeah. I mean, you know, kind of interesting, I suppose. I think they're kind of cuties here. Like I would, yeah, thank you. I would, like if they made like a little replica, like little tiny desktop paperweight statue of these little angel cutie versions of them, I would probably get one.
Yeah.
Because I think they're kind of, this is the serpents at their most adorable. I've been drawing them on the notes page here, and they're real cute. So, so I'm into that. I don't know who that statue is in the middle.
No.
And you know, I've heard. There's another statue earlier on in the high wall that a lot of people think is Sullivan. Some people have said like Sullivan might have been that first scholar in this case, you know, Lothric's advisor. Maybe this is him, and you know, the statue is occluded with wax to show that he is blind, or that he is, you know, he doesn't see, as kind of a mark of disrespect. I've seen, again, just a lot of ideas that don't add up to much here. What's most noteworthy though, when you get out here, is like a dumb 3-on-1 NPC fight, and like we can just copy and paste the when Bloodborne did this, and put it here, where it's like, yes, you can get past it, but you can't fight it fair. Like what these kind of fights do when you put 3-on-1s like this is just force you to be kind of like running away, hitting people when they get up to the top of ladders, you know, doing like, you have to cheese it, you know, like not cheese it like you cheese the undead dragon with arrows, but like it's not like a fight. It's like a, you know, so those things, like, I think they kind of suck. Like, I don't like approaching fights in this way where like I more or less just have to constantly be running away, getting occasional hits when I can.
Yeah. Now, if I was walking with two buddies, then I could see that. Like,
totally.
You know, if it was matched up and we were just kind of deciding how to break this apart, that would be the thing. But like, nobody summons for this. You know, like, unless you're running through an area co-op with somebody, like, it is going to just be you.
I've seen summon signs here.
Oh, wow.
It's pretty rare. I feel like if the game was trying to, so I had that thought too. Like, is this the game trying to signal you, like, hey, bring help, because we're going to put this ridiculous fucking gauntlet of stairs before the boss. You're going to want two people with you if you want to, actually clear that. And I think if they were trying to do that, they would have put an NPC summon here. And that would have, like, to me, it's like, okay, if you want the challenge of like just running around like crazy, getting gank squatted, go for it. But if you want to approach it like a fight, like a Dark Souls fight, you know, like you've done every other fight in the game, here's somebody you can bring with you to kind of even the odds a little bit.
Yeah.
As is, it's like, you can get past it. I can get past it, no problem. It's just like, I either run past it, or I, you know, just kind of like switch to tactics that are not like, that feel like I'm not like cheating. There's no cheating, but it doesn't feel like it's in the spirit of the game to me.
Well, it's just not fun in the way that a one-on-one fight with an NPC is. Like, obviously, I'll use everything to my advantage, but when I'm facing a single NPC, but I'm kind of engaging with the systems more, kind of, you know, rolling out of the way, trying to parry them, stuff like that. Trying to parry one of these guys is a death wish. Like, because the moment you try to do that, one of the other guys will get behind you and backstab you or something else. It's just not very fun. And to to be quite frank, I kind of just ran past these guys. I haven't defeated any of these guys in my playthroughs of the game, just because I just don't think they're worth it.
Yeah. They drop some okay stuff, like they drop unique gear, but that's pretty much it.
Which tells, because these are named characters. These are important people.
Yeah.
Not important, but they're people. They're not just randos.
So the thing that's frustrating about this for me is that I feel like there's been one of these that worked in the series, and that was I think it was 1.4 at the beginning of 1.4 in Demon Souls, when it was a very similar kind of thing where again, you were at the at the doorstep of where you were trying to get to, and here are these, you know, three heroes who are coming at you with everything they've got. But that arena was designed in such a way that you could actually separate them, you know, and like it would provide cover and provide barriers and things like that. Every time since, and by every time I mean like in Bloodborne and in here, it has just been a wide open arena where just basically anybody can come from any direction.
And they've just amped up the aggression
Yes.
of enemies. You know, this is not that dissimilar to like the D&D party in the woods in Dark Souls 1. But those enemies have like leashes. They're easy to pull one at a time. Like they don't group pull. And just the fact that they're not nearly as aggressive because of the engine they're in.
Yeah.
Like I don't think this is quite as bad as the Bloodborne one.
Right.
Like I hate that Bloodborne encounter. Like you can get through it, but it's just like I'm gonna go up and down stairs and hit guys when I can, and I'm gonna do that for 5 minutes until they're all dead.
Yeah.
You know, I don't think it's as bad as that because this kind of encounter design to me works in a slower paced kind of system where like you can create choke points and blocking matters and literal, like not like spacing, but like literally blocking with a shield can matter, things like that. There's also one of the guys here, the Lion Knight Albert here uses a big fuck off axe. And, you know, it's if you're using, you know, when I was using a big fuck off weapon when I first came here, it became like who can hit who first, you know, and that's fine. Like I like that kind of play. Like I always do a soul, you know, earlier Souls game. It's like I'm gonna do a big two-handed weapon and not block. It's fun to be fun. Going through this on my dex build, my like bleed build that kind of turned into an all-purpose dex build because my bleed build was not really like I still do bleed, but it wasn't really viable. Started out as a luck build that also turned out not to be viable. It's very similar to the problem with like the Axulons and the DLC where like I can kind of stick and move and dodge a lot. Anytime I trade hits, I'm just going to get flattened by this guy because of hyper armor. Yeah. You know, and I'm wearing like decent armor. It's just my weapon doesn't have hyper armor kind of attached to it with my swing. So like trading hits never works. He can always kind of poise through my shit. So there's just some mandatory damage when I'm like fighting this guy with other people. You know, if I can't, you know, just kind of back him into a hallway or parry him, you know, because like what Josh said, like parrying is not encouraged in this encounter, then I'm just kind of fucked. And it you know drives me nuts. Like it is a clever composition, and I'm always going to be weak to a D&D party. Like, oh, it's a sorcerer, like a thief and a fighter. Like I can dig that from a flavor perspective a lot. Like I like a well-balanced party. But fighting them all at once, like I just think is a bummer. It's not a war crime. It's not like the worst encounter in the game or anything like that. But like it's a misstep for this area that is otherwise very, very well designed, I think. Like think of like if you ran into these guys in turn, you know, as opposed to like them teaming up on you, like I think it would be kind of neat. Like, oh, these are the 3 different branches that are like trying to stop you from getting to the prince. You know, like they're sending out everything. You'd fight them. It'd be like a one-on-one fight where you fight these very tactically different, you know, fighters, and then you get their equipment and learn who they are, and then move on. Like I would have just liked that experience so much more than this like, oh fuck, well now I got to go do ladder games for, you know, and heaven help you if you didn't like clear out the way back, because if you ran past anything because maybe you were sick of fighting, you know, these things over and over, when you die to this thing, if you run backwards, you're just going to get hit by, you know, guys you failed to clear out. So yeah, I don't know. It's, you know, it's less than fine, but it, you know, it's still frustrating to me.
In the grand comparison of these across the series, I feel like we'd be remiss if we didn't mention the Gank Squad in DS2, the DLC.
But those positioned as a boss.
It's a boss, right? Then that's and like that's what makes that work. If you think it works, in the DLC. You know, it's like I said, if you think it works, you're saying what I'm saying.
It's like, so that is frustrating too. So like for people who want us to be frustrated by everything equally, but that is positioned at least as a boss, you know, and also that arena is actually made for that. You know, you're doing boring shit. Like you're running in these kind of circles and creating these choke points, but there are choke points and stuff there without you backtracking through half the level to create them.
It's a Mario Kart arena.
Exactly. Mario Kart Battle Zone. Up to the top of the castle.
Yeah, so we get to the rooftop, and this is kind of the apex. We have an option of which way we want to go. We can either proceed to what is very obviously the last stand, or we can turn around and see what's going up in that rotunda.
Like I'm always gonna my rotunda wants some, hun, unless it's got rotundas, hun. So like Yeah, I'm gonna go check out that rotunda.
Ooh. Can I scope that dome?
Yeah, yeah, I shall. So on your way up to this rotunda, we're introduced to finally the like evolution of the winged knights, which like these guys are like pretty silly,
Yep.
and like just like big flying fat dudes. But it's interesting that like because before it was all just kind of like they drew those paintings and you had this idea that it was like aspirational, like this is a painting, it's a symbol, they are of the angels, but like no, like you can literally ascend and grow wings and fly in this cosmology.
And again, like looking at this, we have two different things that grow wings for completely different reasons.
Yeah. I mean, I have to admit, and I'm hoping you guys will explain this. I'm not really sure what's going on here at all. Like this kind of, maybe it was because by this point I had kind of lost faith in the storytelling of Dark Souls 3 and kind of tuned out. But I really, this really came out of nowhere for me. And I don't know if you guys felt similarly or you felt like this was built up properly. But for me, it was just like, whoa, what's going on here?
It was surprising to see that it be taken literally, because at no point did I think it was going to be a literal thing.
Yeah.
I did know that the winged knights were allied with like Gertrude and with the angels. So having that, the literalism of it was surprising. Gertrude had a sense of fireworks factory to me during this whole thing, because she's been mentioned a couple times up until this point, and once you see that she is, bringing this faith of angels, and then you remember back to the wars in the high wall between the angel knights and the Lothric knights. That's what it looks like, is there's a fight between them. I was like, oh, we're gonna run into Gertrude. I kind of like expected that Gertrude could be a boss before the princes.
Yeah.
At this point, like I was, on my first time through, I'm like, oh, I'm gonna run into Gertrude. There's gonna be Gertrude information. So I was expecting it, maybe expecting more than this, because again, the more you think about it, the more it kind of falls apart. Like you do find Gertrude, you do find some information about Gertrude here, but you don't find any real answers about Gertrude or the angels.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I have my hopes up because, okay, a daughter who is sealed away because of something dangerous to the society. Okay, like the series has a good history with that. But yeah, so these guys, they are guarding the very top of this because Gertrude is being kept in a cage that is hanging over top of the archives, right? Yeah. So you go down there, you find her miracle, Divine Pillars of Light, which kind of tells her story. I guess I didn't take notice. So this is full of feathers, but is her body in there?
You pick up the miracle from a body.
Okay.
So the people online who debate this stuff, there is some question as to whether that is Gertrude's body. I feel like that's the only thing that makes sense.
Yeah.
To me, like you pick up this item strongly associated with her from a cage filled with feathers that like she was visited by an angel.
Yeah.
And we know that she has been, imprisoned. So that's the thing that makes sense to me. Like you do pick it up off a body that I assumed was hers.
Yeah. Yeah. The only thing I could see being a way out of that is that the cage is open from the bottom. Like,
yes.
I would much rather it not be a body. Like I would like for her to have gotten out.
Well, the cage being open, so in the kind of some good like old style Souls environmental storytelling, is we also find the hunter's ring on the way here. So the idea being that the hunter assassinated her.
Yeah.
Like the hunter, that being the storyline, the hunter got in, opened the cage, killed her. That is why she is dead in the cage. Why the hunter did that, I'm not totally sure.
Or she killed the hunter. That's the body that's in there, and accidentally dropped her miracle.
It's possibly like planted the miracle on her. If people ever became, I would quit this show if people became savvy enough to plant item descriptions onto things. like if it became where it's like, oh, like he put this in this corpse's pocket to make me think the corpse was him. Like, and just literally, oh, like this entire part of the storytelling like is now unreliable. Like in a thing full of unreliable storytelling, this one part is like I thought was reliable is now not.
Yeah.
I don't know if I quit the show, but it would be a grand fuck you on like a level, that we had not seen before.
Yeah, but my tongue is half in my cheek for that.
Oh, like, yeah. No, I think so. I don't think you think that she dropped it onto his corpse. Like we've never had signaling that is like something. If something's on a corpse, it's owned by that person because there are just freestanding items.
Yep.
Like we have things that are dropped. So it could, I mean, Gertrude could be in play. Like the other thing I would think of more than it being the assassin is what if the angel that visited her was imprisoned? That still leaves a huge question mark as to where Gertrude is.
Yeah.
And that's unsatisfying in its own sense. But that again, Krusty might get here and that might be related to the second DLC. So I don't know.
Yeah, we just don't know. So this miracle is one of the things that was given to Gertrude. The transferring of this knowledge rendered her blind and deaf, I think. But she is the one who kind of like got this and scrolled it down, and it became the basis of the angelic faith. So something that is kind of unclear, and I don't know if I can answer this for you, Joshua. They are so at turns she is described as either a daughter or as the Queen's holy maiden, and I don't know what the distinction between those two would be.
You're not asking Josh because he's
I'm just saying no, I'm not. I'm speaking directly to him because like I can't provide any certainty around that. Like, like it has like whichever way it goes, that has a lot of implications for the way this shakes out. Yeah.
It just this again is just kind of linked into like the half of Dark Souls 3 that I'm frustrated with, because this whole angels thing is so underdeveloped, and it just feels like a dead end narratively, and it's just, I know From can do better, and that's what's frustrating. If this was any other series of video games, like I think this would bother me a lot less. But because these guys have demonstrated that they can thread the needle really delicately and really elegantly, this like really slapdash kind of like this, it's just really frustrating.
Yeah.
Also, just in the Gary's connection corner, there's a man grub here.
Yep.
We have their associate connections with Rosaria, so connections with the Cathedral of the Deep. Why this man grub is here, like again, like these waters are so fucking muddy.
Or would you say they're stagnant?
I mean, they're churning, like they're it's like a roiling like puddle of greasy flesh that is just kind of like,
wow.
Rather, you didn't say that.
Well, I'm passionate. So there's a man grub here too. So like toss that into the stew of possible like crazy lore theories you can come up with as to what's going on with Gertrude here.
I think they just didn't want to hurt its feelings by leaving it out.
It's such a like the man grubs appearing in kind of places outside of Rosaria's chamber has been like, so the one that's in Irithyll,
right?
Like, okay, one of the cathedral or the deacons went there. So like maybe that's why that man grub went, because one of the deacons turned into a man grub. So maybe that's why that one went there. There's something there, but like this one, it doesn't have that feeling of like there's so many things that are like that, like a little thing that's making a cameo from another area. And to head off, the straw man in my head that criticizes us a lot. Like, yes, Dark Souls 2 had a problem with rando enemies.
Right.
Like, Grave Wardens were in Earthen Peak. I get it. Like, that sucks. We called that out then too. It also sucked. But this is not just an enemy that's there to fill like a combat role. Like this is one enemy that's a more or less a non-trivial threat.
Yeah.
That is here to signify something.
They have other stuff that would fill the same purpose of
like
being
a candle
something.
Speller.
Yeah, they've got dudes who will shoot laser beams at you who fit in here. And just so we're taking proper inventory, the gargoyles are the people with the profane flame. Like that is something from the profane capital that comes up here.
So it just is just kind of a web outward that like it's almost like they designed this if they were trying to make it so you could make your like the people who come up with Dark Souls 3 lore theories who are like really, really, it's almost like they made it to encompass more possibility space. So like this fact that it feels to us, to speak for you guys a little bit, like that there's not actually an answer to a lot of this stuff. It feels like almost like it was made for that, because the people who talk to me about like kind of pitch Dark Souls 3 theories to me, the common element is they always say at the end, like, I know there's no support for this, but I feel very proud of it because it's mine.
Right.
So it's almost like in the previous games, there was a thing there for the most part, like, again, just silencing our harshest critic, where it's like
Dark Souls 2 is looser.
Dark Souls 2 is looser. In the other 3 previous games, I feel like there is a storyline there. Like there's not nearly as much up for debate as people associate that with the series. Most of this, like the questions that needed to be answered in Bloodborne, Demon Souls, and Dark Souls 1 are answered.
Yeah.
Like there's a couple little loose threads, but for the most part, they are complete narratives.
And even the stuff that felt like it was unsatisfying in Dark Souls 2, there was hope that it would be answered over time.
Yeah.
Or at least, and not just by the addition of DLC, but just like, oh, we just need to work at this a little bit more and we're going to figure this out. The Scholar update helped that as well. But like with this, I don't think that time is going to bring any more clarity to it.
Like a DLC could. Time is not going to. And my original point was just that, like, by having all of these mysteries at 40% rather than 70%, it's kind of like everybody plays this Club Cranium. Like it almost is made for people to be able to just be like, yeah, like make up whatever you want. Every area connects to every other area. Every single lore theory is plausible enough to like write it down on Reddit. So like make your videos. And we see that cottage industry of like kind of loresters, like people doing that. It's exploded with this game.
I mean, we're a part of it. We're tangentially related to it, but
a boom in it, like more people.
Yeah.
Like there are more internet, like YouTube loresters and stuff about Dark Souls 3 than there were about Bloodborne, than there were about Dark Souls 2. Like it has exploded with this. And I think that's I wonder if that's part of the design, to where it's just like, hey, like everybody take a crack at this. And we're going to make a thing that doesn't close off any options, where every area is connected to every other area in the game, because no matter what you come up with, you can make it fit.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, like, I think that's extremely bad.
Yeah.
It feels a little bit like that.
If this kind of analysis, the Dark Souls loresters, if they were being held to the standards of like academic, interpretation, everything they're coming up with for this game at least would just fall to pieces, because you need evidence to back your claims. Like so much, like my girlfriend's an academic historian, and she always tells me like a lot of history is interpretation. It's not set in stone. You're just trying to figure out what went on based on people's writings and the culture and stuff like that. And the best lore research from the original game was kind of built on that kind of academic standards of tying all your claims to a piece of evidence and making sure evidence fits together. Whereas with some of the stuff I've seen for Dark Souls 3, it's people kind of creating evidence out of nowhere to justify their claim, and it's really frustrating for me. Because it, like, and Gary said this in an earlier one, it's like, well, if this is the case, well, no, don't say if. Give me give me a line of text. Give me an item placed in the world. Give me a statue that represents it. If it's existing purely in your imagination, then you don't have, there's no claim to be made there. That's fan fiction at that point. It's not narrative interpretation.
Yeah, and the presentation is really, between those two things, is kind of the problem. Like, there's fun to be had, just kind of flights of fancy, right? Like, I get the idea that it can be kind of fun to just be like, what if this? But because of that kind of confusion between previous entries and this one, where some people, I think, maybe feel like that has always been the case with the series. So like these kind of flights of, like, all of those lore things are all elevated flights of fancy. And there is a difference. It is not a black and white difference. Most things, there is a detail left out or two, like a couple small loose ends in the previous games that are more coherent than this. but it's not just that fan fiction. Like the fact that we are how many months out from this game launching, and I like literally read not one coherent supportive theory about the profaned flame.
Mm-hmm.
Like it can be coherent and like make logical sense, or it can have a little bit of evidence and not make any sense at all. But I haven't read one of them, and this is with like literally like the entire community behind it.
Yeah.
Like none of it is good enough to, like what you're saying, Josh. Like it doesn't stand up to any kind of like real scrutiny. And like, I mean, again, we get some shit for repeating ourselves about this, but this is a great example of it. Like this area, as much as I like it, like this is in the top half of areas for Dark Souls 3 for me. Like I like this area a lot, has connections to every other part of the game. And it makes the kind of like lore diving that we like to do and that other people like to do really problematic.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to, since this is a major question in the game, the Angels of Lothric, Gertrude is a major part of this game, seemingly. Like if there's this civil war happening in an area that is 4 levels of the game associated with, a major part of the game, like that is significant. Like I want to know more about that. And there just not being an answer for it is bad.
Yeah.
So
we hit on something there, just kind of like, people just think that this is always how it's been. Like, I wonder if this is kind of the weird counterpart of the whole assumption that, hey, difficult is good. Like, Dark Souls is difficult, therefore, let's kind of go for it. Like this kind of misconception or simplified view of a value of the series. Dark Souls lore is always a little bit fragmented and disconnected, and just like that is the thing that distinguishes it from anything else. Mm-hmm. So therefore this is fine and this is the way it's always been, and just kind of accept it.
Yeah, like is that the for such folk, is it something like that's what they like about it? Like that fragmented, like the fact that it's a little bit fragmented, and if you can turn that up to 11 like they've done with like difficulty, especially in like parts of the DLC and stuff, that just like hurt me more. Mm-hmm. And for me that was never what was special about it. So yeah. So anywho, let's move on before more people angrily unsubscribe from us. I don't know. Like I think this is Gertrude. What that means, I don't know. Yeah. Anywho,
yeah.
Going back up to the bridge, which is like clearly leading to the boss, and clearly a reference to Boletaria 1-3, the end of 1-3.
Yeah.
The run up to the Penetrator fight. We have this really, really tough run here that like I've cleared out because I try to clear out everything. Mm-hmm. But it is awful to clear out because there are 3 super slashulons at the end.
Yep. And they kind of put me off my guard a little bit, because for the first time in a long time we just have hollow warriors here, mm-hmm. like kind of manning the stuff, and it's difficult to tell where the supercharged slashulons are going to pop out. And they're not just buffing themselves with crystal here, they're actually buffing with divine as well. Mm-hmm. So yeah. It's just good God, this is very difficult if you're not just trying to get past it.
Yep. So luckily, like in anytime moving forward, I have just run past everything.
Yeah.
Because the alternative again kind of sucks. I think. Yeah. So moving on, we get up to the top here. We get to the there's an elevator up at the top, thankfully, that takes you to the Dragon Slayer armor approach.
Yeah.
The funny story about that elevator, once you've unlocked it, it becomes like a trick elevator, where you can send it up and get on it. I did that. I got off the elevator. I died to the boss. Got on the elevator, went down to the slab. I'd never seen that slab before this last time I played.
Okay.
And I was like, okay. And then went back up. It took me an embarrassingly long time to figure out the trick. So I was like, did I do something that makes this elevator only go down? How the fuck do I get back up to the thing? Like, and it took me a really like embarrassingly long time. Like I was hanging out and playing it with Brayton there, and like, I, as my witness, it was embarrassing and stupid. So it took me a very long time.
The dumb thing is I figured it out before, but in the in the intervening time I forgot, and so I was also fumbling around with this thing too. Mm-hmm. Even though like the series has done this exact same trick several times.
Yeah. It was I just because it was new, like I felt like I knew everything about it, and I didn't. So, yeah. So you get up to the top to this throne room. Let's talk about this throne room after we get past the Slashulons there.
Yeah. So you open up this very large, ornate blue door, and you go down this hallway with busted statues and ragged carpet. And we find out, we get the sense, yes, the showdown with Lothric is approaching. You can get some help for this, NPC-wise, if you have finished up their quest lines. The less involved one of these is to get Orbeck to come in, our snobby friend from the Road of Sacrifices. If you give him all the scrolls and buy all of his spells and don't kill him for Yuria, he will join you for this fight.
Yep. And we'll show up again. He will actually, like, if you summon him for this fight, that's his final thing, and he will appear dead at a table in the archives.
Yes. The other person is Cirrus of the Sunless Realms.
Mm-hmm. And you have to do her kind of more convoluted quest line, which I feel like we mostly talked about.
Yeah.
I don't know if we actually did the end of that. We have to do an NPC roundup.
Yeah.
Probably, in the last episode, and just touch on the people we haven't touched on, because I know we haven't talked about what's his head? Ringfinger. Yeah, and his whole thing. So we have to do kind of an NPC roundup, and we will for people who are screaming about, like, why haven't you talked about Ringfinger yet? But she kind of shows up. This is her final hurrah as well.
Right. And
you can summon her, and she'll appear dead at Hodrick's grave.
Right.
And you'll get the Sunset Talisman. Hodrick's grave being under the Undead Settlement.
Yes. And so we can walk through this door, and this gets us to the boss encounter. Do we want to talk about the speech first, or do we want to do the music?
Let's talk about the speech. I'm not going to cut it in here because I used it at the beginning of the episode.
Okay.
So,
and yeah, we're not the first person to come here. We're not the first unkindled. Like, he either knows about us, or has encountered others like us. Everybody is going for this brass ring. That is this dude.
I love this. Like, we've talked about dialogue during boss fights in Souls games like tons of times. I think it is a weakness for both of us. And this voice acting sells it.
It's
really well to me.
Gwendolyn's VO artist.
Yeah. It does really great. Like this kind of menacing, but still kind of we're still advancing kind of the plot or the character of this. Like, I do not want this. Like, hey, and you're not going to take it from me. Like, I'm not going to die so you can do this. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to die so you can do it. You've done enough. Now have your rest.
Yep. I've made my decision, and you're not going to change my mind. So one of us is going to have to die. Which is
in a weird way, like, makes this like one of the less moral things you do in this thing. Like, you're not fighting somebody who's hollowed, right? Like, Yorm was a mercy killing. Aldrich was a monster. Like, this is not somebody who's gone crazy. This is just somebody who has decided not to kill themselves to relink the fire. And you're taking that choice away from them. You're like, well, if you won't kill yourself to do this, I will make you throw yourself upon, I'm going to drag you kicking and screaming to this.
Yeah.
And this, he's done everything he can to keep you out. Like, Lothric, other than making that kind of selfish choice not to sacrifice himself, is not an immoral agent.
Right.
In this. And that's rare in these games. Like, it's kind of great, like when we fought Mikolash, like, he's bug nuts. Like, he's bonkers and has done questionable things. Like, we find him surrounded by corpses who are, like, he's but this, like, Lothric, that's not the case, and that lends like so much kind of awesome gravitas to this fight.
Yeah.
Of course, we're talking about 1-2 princes who kneel before you. This is what I said. It is Lorien and Lothric.
I'm going to leave it up to you whether or not you want to cut in that music.
I'm either going to cut in the music for the boss fight,
Okay.
2 princes from the Spin Doctors.
Please do.
Or this town ain't big enough for the both of us. So I'm just gonna play all 3 of them on top of each other. Like,
I'm jealous that this is your edit. But yeah, we step out, and we're not actually fighting Lothric right away. This is a patented 2-person boss fight, and he is sending his older brother Lorien after you. Lorien is very affecting. I think that like he really adds to the pathos of this because like these two brothers, they're so close, and Lorien just will do everything he can to help him out. Like Lorien, this massive knight, this incredibly powerful person who killed a demon prince, by this bond with his brother, is actually like assuming a share of his curse, and so when he comes at you and is fighting you, he's actually like on his knees.
Yeah, because he's been kind of laid low as well. By the same thing, like by taking part of his brother's curse.
Right.
Which his brother. We'll talk about the stuff with his brother here, but kind of intertwined himself.
Yeah.
With his brother, who his brother was meant to be kind of the, like, there's so much pathos in this one little boss fight that just makes me wish this was like a little expanded upon and the game had focused more on this stuff because it's golden.
Yeah.
His brother was the person who was meant to be born to link the flame. Like, we know that is a value in this society, creating this very strong heir. But he was born, crippled. Like, he was born without the ability to do that. And so his younger brother was going to do it, and his older brother was like, I will tie my fate to yours, and paid the price for it.
Yeah.
Like, their relationship is just like really like narratively satisfying and ludically satisfying.
Yeah.
Like, we actually, like, when in the second half of this boss fight, which we'll get to, where like Lothric literally rides around on his back, like, and Lorien can't walk.
Right.
It's like, so it's that quiet dignity thing, like, done so well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That we all love.
And
it's
go ahead.
It's not so much a quote of the Estrella moment in Demon Souls, because mechanically it works a lot different, but tonally it's really capturing that same level of pathos for the characters involved and making you, the player, feel guilty for the actions that you're undertaking.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, this is an immoral act. Like, and these are pathetic characters. That you are killing. It's really, really good, and it's my favorite fight in the game too. Even if it is a two life bar boss fight, it's feels very like fair and balanced. Like, so when you're fighting Lorien, who crawls around on his knees, attacking with his demon encrusted greatsword.
Yeah.
And the cool thing is he's fighting. He can barely walk, but he gets around because Lothric is teleporting him around.
Yeah.
Like, that's such a cool, like, we haven't seen that before, where like a character off screen is kind of like manipulating the character on screen like this.
So even though you aren't fighting Lothric directly, he is fighting you by providing this assist for his brother. And this normally I don't like stuff that plays around with the camera like that or breaks lock. But like, it's so cool when he reels up for an attack and then teleports kind of just like off to the side of you, and then you have to dodge in a different direction than you expected. The nice thing that it affords you is when he teleports, his animations restart. So it does give you, like, you have more time. It's not like he reels back and then teleports and then lowers. Like, you have more time than you think, but the effect overall is one that this guy is actually coming at you from all sides.
Yeah. I think it also works because he's so low to the ground. You're always kind of looking at kind of a similar angle around you. If a big tall guy, like, I don't know, the Giant Lord or something, had this ability to teleport around, this would be, a really frustrating encounter. But I feel like they've designed around it by kind of including the narrative elements of this fight with the mechanical elements of this fight, and using that disability as a way of blocking the character, so he's always low down, he's always low to the ground, so the camera doesn't get too confused, and you, the player, don't get too confused because he's always in frame. He's always easy to track because of that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
absolutely. Like he teleports around, which is, again, like Kole said, is normally something I dislike, but the fight is forgiving enough to where if you were dodging in the wrong direction, your iframes will probably still cover it.
Mm-hmm.
Like the important thing is to know to dodge when that happens. And he's not like, it's not unchallenging. Like it's a little bit easier than the like, we are going to difficulty fuck you, like, bosses that we see sometimes in this series. So it's still challenging. It's not quite as challenging, but it does do like cool, tricky shit. Like it has delayed hits, which I love. And like in the world of things you can do, like on the spectrum of like unlimited stamina combos and big swings that you really don't want to get hit by, that you have to learn the timing, I'm always going to favor the latter.
Yeah.
Because once you get that feeling with this guy where like once you get it, you can not get hit during this fight.
Yeah.
Like I usually will get hit, but I had this feeling of like, oh, if I am good enough at this, like I will be able to dodge every attack and just feel like an absolute master.
Yeah.
Because it's balanced in that way that I really, really appreciate. And how good is it, like, again, that intersection of like the narrative and character of these in the fight, when he does kind of rise up and kind of get up a little bit only to fall down with his attack. Like he kind of rears up and he can't quite do it, and it's like it's like what I play these games for, like those moments of like again, kind of patheticness in the threat that I'm fighting. And it is, like we said, it is a two-phase boss fight. After you get his health down, and he's fairly easy, which is what the first phase of a two-phase boss fight should be. We get some dialogue I am going to cut in here because it's some of my favorite dialogue in the game, possibly my favorite dialogue in the game here.
Yeah. My brother, unyielding sword of Lothric's prince, rise if you would, for that is our curse.
Oh man. It was so good. I got goosebumps when I first encountered this. Like this is a person that we're fighting who is actively expressing compassion.
Yeah.
Like saying like, okay, we're gonna go and do this together. Like, and it's not even just kind of like rise. Like it's phrased as a question. Rise if you would.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like we're fucking monsters.
Well, and it's the NPCs or bosses acknowledging a player conceit. Like it's there's like a hint of irony in that, like something getting resurrected in this game because of magic happens, but being like, no, we're undead, this is our curse, like and like that little bit of kind of like winking that it does there is like super good. It also does the thing that multiple phase boss fights do that I really love, where the second phase is not like, here's an entirely new moveset.
Right.
It's not Ludwig. it's Maria. It's all of these moves are the same thing but plus.
Right.
Like it's a little bit more dangerous. There's two of these beams. There's a little delay between the second one. You have to deal with these little fluttering firefly magic missile things.
Yeah. And even the stuff that like was kind of easy to get around, either the flame spray or the crazy deadly beam that Lorien would throw away, you're still watching for those. He still telegraphs them, about a half a minute ahead of time. But you are, just by having this extra person to keep track of, it does change it appreciably. Yeah, absolutely.
Like it makes a big difference. It also, like I'm talking a lot of sugar about this. I don't think I don't think the boss fights in this game get better than this. Like there are other boss fights I like, but this is my favorite.
Yeah.
So it does the thing where one character will resurrect the other. The previous iteration of this was the Throne Watcher and Throne Defender, like a widely and probably rightly derided boss fight from Dark Souls 2. Even though I do think that was an interesting thing because they were not very particularly fun to fight on their own, but the concept there was keep both characters at roughly the same amount of health. This one character will always resurrect the other one. And since they're in the same kind of hitbox, the same area, it becomes where you strike the enemy becomes what's important.
Yeah.
So like in a boss fight where you're not getting a damage advantage for backstabs, like you now have a concentrated target. Like you want to get behind the prince so your damage hits the smaller prince, the younger prince. So because that's who you actually have to kill, because Lorien will just keep coming back. And that's harder to do.
Yeah.
Like getting in attacks from the side or front is much easier in this fight. And that's what you've been doing for the whole first half. Now, using the same moveset that you've been kind of trained to understand, you have to try to position yourself differently too. It's like a little bit of a tweak on a thing rather than just being like, here's a whole new boss, which is the bad form of a 2-phase boss fight, I feel like.
Yeah.
So this it's so good.
Yeah. And,
so goddamn.
It's not even entirely bad if you happen to kill Lorien before Lothric, which is going to happen. Like the real health meter that you're paying attention to is Lothric's. But if you take Lorien out, he's open, or Lothric is open for a couple of hits, so you can go in, and he's very weak and very frail. You just have to get away before he fires off his AOE.
Yeah.
Like that is the progression of it. Like he's going to resurrect Lorien 1 or 2 times before you actually get the ability to do this, if you're not able to attack Lothric on his back or when they're separated.
Yeah. Yeah, it is to my mind, like it is what it is, like the perfect balance. Like this is it's in my top like boss, top 10 boss fights in the game. Like I love this fight. And it's for those reasons.
Is there anything that we missed on this, Joshua?
No, I think you've covered my points. I would just add that this particular fight, along with the dancer, I think really demonstrate the talents of From Software's animators. Animation's always like a thing I key into in video games, because I think if you're limited in terms of, the amount of detail you can put on a character's face or something like that, just being able to add that personality through movement and subtle movements of arms, legs, and what have you, it can just convey so much personality. And these two here are such a triumph of animation. Lorien especially, just the way he moves around the environment, this kind of awkward, pained swings of the sword and kind of pulling himself across the ground trying to get at you. It so successfully conveys not only, the information you need as a player to avoid his attacks, but just kind of conveys the suffering of these characters. It's just, I think From Software have some of the better animators in the industry. I think they do such a good job.
Very well put.
Yeah, Dancer is another highlight for very similar reasons. In all senses, like in difficulty curve as well as, kind of that animation bit.
Yeah.
So super, super good. You also get some, like, I love the dialogue when you die here too, where he's like, if you'd like, you can rest here and with us. Like,
yeah, this is our grave too, so we'll just let you molder in the corner.
Like we're waiting for the end of the world, and you can wait with us. My general sensitivity or appreciation of the attitude in these games of like, nope, this is not worth it, throw it away. Which is something I'm generally sympathetic to in this series.
Yeah.
And just having him be so cordial about it. Like, he's so polite. He's courtly.
Also, strangely, this room has feathers in it.
Yeah. Yeah, I do not.
I don't mean to like throw a bucket of cold water on this.
Don't I'm sorry for that boner buster here at the end, but I more or less chose to ignore that because I don't, it's like, yes, they're there. I don't get it. Like, I don't, the angels are not set up in kind of, so if the angels are cramped, the angels would be, Kath rather, they would be against linking of the fire. They kind of started this war. Maybe they counseled Lothric, like maybe he's just associated with them and they are part of, we know that a scholar put this idea in his head. So maybe that was an angel in disguise or something. Maybe the angels came along and said, yeah, do what your teacher said to do also. I don't know. it makes sense for angels to be associated with this character who is not linking, not about linking the fire with what we know about Lothric culture. So it's fine. It doesn't add very much to the things I like about this boss fight.
Yep.
Yep. Yeah.
So we haven't talked about Lothric's physical design. The thing that sticks out most to me is he's got a little case of Osiris Seath arms going on.
He's got mega fingers.
Yeah. Mega fingers are.
Yeah, he's got PowerPoint mega fingers. Microsoft PowerPoints.
Yep. So by the items that you can get off of these guys, the ashes and the souls, we get a little bit more of the story. We should probably tie up all the loose ends that we have here between the two of them. Lothric is kind of the result of this experimentation, probably an awful lot of inbreeding, pure breeding, all this kind of stuff in order to make the most worthy heir, to fulfill the ultimate purpose of Lothric and probably his dad, maybe, to link the fire. This was his destiny. He was seen as being kind of the best fit for this, but ultimately ended up not being because of the way he came out.
Yeah. So they neglected to link the fire, as we can tell from their soul, decided to sit down, link their souls together, and decided to sit down and watch the world kind of fade. Young Lothric was meant to be a champion, is expected to wield a platinum sword you can make from its soul, but some things will remain distant dreams forever, which is very good.
Yep.
And then Lorien out of nowhere, before Lorien embraced his brother's curse, he was a knight who single-handedly slayed the demon prince. Okay, let's just ignore that one weird little did this story need him going off to slay a demon prince? Like, God, I don't know.
Connections, Gary.
Yes.
If he was attacking with a fire sword, we would wonder what up with that. Probably.
Would we?
I don't know. Maybe
there's lots of magic. There's lots of magic fire things. Like I can make fire happen to my weapon. I wouldn't have wondered. I would have been like, okay, there's he's got a magic sword.
Yeah, there are other worlds than these.
Yeah.
And a weird detail that I actually didn't know: if you get both of their weapons. You have to do this on New Game Plus. You can actually fuse their swords together
to make the Northern Regalia,
exactly.
The Demon Souls,
yes.
Thing. And the big difference, it's not like it's a super powered weapon, but it allows you to do both the weapon arts.
Yes.
Which is pretty cool. Like that's, I imagine could be cool for PvP. I haven't seen it a lot, but it widens your verb set for catching fools.
Yeah.
As kind of so now we've collected all of the Lords of Cinder.
Yeah.
So if we want to, we can go back to Firelink and go into the end game, but we have an optional area still to tackle.
Yes.
So next episode, in 2 weeks, we're going to be talking about the dragon,
Archdragon Peak.
Thank you, Archdragon Peak, and we're going to be joined by Aegon of Astora, a lorester, and a longtime listener and stuff. We've interacted with him and the like. Looking forward to that, and to being the person, the advocate online for not liking the Nameless King boss fight. So so if you have anything to say about that, please hit us up at Duckfeed.tv /contact. In the meantime, Josh, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah. I feel like, I hope you don't feel like we talked over you or anything. I feel like we didn't maybe give you enough opportunities to talk or anything, and I apologize for that if that's the case.
Oh, no problem at all. I spoke when I felt the need to speak and add something, so don't worry. It's not a problem.
It's easy for me to get on a roll.
Yeah.
Kind of a train in this stuff. Where can people find you and your work online?
Yeah, so you can find my work on CanaanRinse.com, where you'll find our podcast series, where we take a game or maybe a couple of games and kind of dissect them and analyze them in detail. You'll also find various thoughts from the team in the form of articles and reviews on the site. And you can find me on Twitter at Combine Hunter, where I talk about video games and then occasionally have existential crises about Brexit, and yeah, that's always fun to read.
We understand, I think.
Yeah, we definitely do. And by the time this, for a little while, we understand. By the time this episode drops. Thank you again, for joining us. We really do appreciate it. And your work is recommended. Cane and Rinse is really, really great. And it's been fun. One of the things that I can say about Josh, or saying about you, is that on Twitter, like we see eye to eye pretty well on Dark Souls 3. We don't see eye to eye on everything, but out of people who I will sometimes debate is too strong a word, that I'll disagree with on Twitter, I am as confident with you as anyone I've ever been confident with, of like, oh, like this is a good, healthy discussion of this and like why this works. I never, like I know that you are bringing thoughtfulness to it, and I never feel attacked or anything like that. Like it is, you are a fun person to disagree with and a fun person to agree with, as shown by this episode.
Yep.
But I always feel good about if something comes up and I'm like, I can say like, oh, I don't really see it like that. Why do you think that? And it's always led to like really good kind of 20 entry long Twitter thread kind of things I've really appreciated.
Yeah, thanks. Also, I would be remiss not to mention your guys' appearance on Sound of Play for our Halloween episode, where I helped you guys with some guy who's torturing you, I think. Yeah, sorry about that.
It was a really weird situation.
Yeah.
I still don't know entirely what was up, but I appreciate the assist. It was greatly needed.
That was I don't know if we've mentioned that on a show yet. We talked about it on Twitter when it came out, but that was so fun. That was really, really good. So Sound of Play, tell everybody who's listening what Sound of Play is.
Yeah, so Sound of Play is a podcast where we come together and kind of select our favorite tracks from various video game soundtracks, and normally the show kind of just plays out as like a casual chat between two of the hosts, but occasionally we have special episodes, particularly during the Halloween period, where some characters will take over the show, and then we let Ryan loose on the editing side of things, and he ends up creating these fantastic tapestries of comedy and music. And yeah, it's a really fun podcast to be a part of.
Yeah, yep, it was a lot of fun to be set loose on that, just to goof around.
Yeah. 100%. And also, like, I haven't slept since. Like, it was scary as fuck. So, like, nightmares for days. That is scared the shit out of me. Yeah, it is super fun. I recommend everybody listen to that, and there'll be a link in the show notes to that episode.
Yeah.
So as per usual, we let Josh go, as we do. But that man is a delight.
Yeah.
And we're talking in the green room, like it is so nice that like these other podcasts that do similar things to podcasts that we do, that we're all friends.
Yes.
So it's not like damn those twin humanities, all like we're gonna smack them around. Like no, we're those guys are great and we like them and we're friends, and like the Retronauts are great and we like them and we're friends, and Cane and Rinse are great and we like them and we're friends. Like it is so nice that like it's a good community.
Yeah.
Similar to like the best parts of the Dark Souls community.
Yeah.
Where it's like, oh, like we're actually just we all like the same thing. We're united. Let's treat it like that.
Yep.
So
Let's
I appreciate that quite a bit.
Yeah. So like we said, if you have any thoughts about like any of the upcoming stuff, we're already getting some letters about the DLC. That's cool. All of that'll be filed away. That is Duckfeed.tv/contact. What do we want to talk about? I imagine at the beginning of this we talked about Duckstream.
Yeah, but we should talk about it again.
Yes.
So when you're hearing this, the following Friday, November 11th, we are starting our charity live stream. We do me and Kole do an annual charity live stream. Our community does one in the spring as well. But we do a charity live stream to benefit the Transactive Gender Center. This is 48 hours of streaming goodness. starting Friday the 11th at 7 p.m. PST with the Portland branch, which is going to be myself, Nick Lauber, and Brayton Cameron from other shows on the network. And in Brayton's case, from down the hall. And we're going to be playing all kinds of stuff. We have a partial schedule up on Duckfeed.tv /Duckstream. But we have a couple like fun, exciting donation incentives and the like. There are being able to pick games for me and Nick's show or songs for me and Brayton's show. You can get signed copies of Souls of Darkness with some Kickstarter exclusive stuff. The comic that came with that, the manual, things like that I have extra that I don't give out willy-nilly. Those are for special appearances and things like that. So pretty rare, and it is all for a really, really great cause. At 7 p.m. on Saturday PST, I'm passing over to Kole, who is ...
Who is going to be running a marathon of Resident Evil games.
Of running.
What's that?
A marathon of running.
Yeah, I know, right?
It
probably would take me 12 hours to do that. But or no, 24, I guess. Yeah, whichever one. Time is meaningless. But no, I'm going to be running a marathon of Resident Evil games, starting with Resident Evil 0, and I think I'm going to get up to a partial playthrough of 2. We're just going to see how this goes. And going to be doing that probably Sunday morning. Gonna have to tap in somebody from the community so I can take a brief little nap, because here's the thing, staying up for that long alone is a very difficult thing to do.
I imagine so. It's not easy with people.
Yeah.
It would be harder by yourself.
Yes. But the incentives there, you can choose a game that I play for my horror game streaming series. And you can also, at a certain point, like at different milestone levels, I will fire off miniature confetti cannons inside my house. This is not a lie. I'm still finding confetti from the time that I did this last year. So, like, you just to celebrate, we will make my apartment as messy as possible, and I do not like that happening.
No.
So the cool thing about this is we have a pretty high goal set, which we've met our goals every time before. The other thing is, like, this is going to put us past $10,000 given to this very worthy cause. As a network, with the community's help, over the past 3 or 4 events that we've done.
Yeah, and it's it's great. Like they need it, they can use it. It is I feel like we do these things, and this was born out of a very galvanizing time, for kind of forces of inclusivity and stuff. And we are in another such time.
Yep.
So it is more important than ever to be able to do this. We really appreciate anyone who's able to give. If you can't give, we understand money being tight. Tune in and spread the word.
Yep.
Retweets, restreams, things like that. All those things are really useful.
Yeah. Support in the chat is a huge deal.
Yeah. Anything you can do really, really helps.
Yeah.
So we also, if we're selling shirts related to it too. So if you want to just not donate, if you want to get something for your donation, if you go to Duckfeed.tv /shirts, you can see the Duckstream kind of exclusive design there, and all proceeds from that go to the charity as well.
Yes. That is actually, you can find a link to that on the Duckstream page, Duckfeed.tv /Duckstream, and information will also be on the Twitch channel. We're Duckfeed.tv on Twitch.
Yes.
Yeah.
So all this stuff, I mean, watch social media. We'll have announcements and all of that. But it's going to be very fun. I look forward to it. It's a very fun thing to do every year, and it is. I never feel better about our listeners than when this happens.
Yeah.
So thank you guys very much. If you do support us directly through Patreon, we really do appreciate it. We have been surpassing goals lately, and we have a brand new show that's coming to the network called Radio Free Midworld, which is Kole and company, rotating guests, kind of like Ken Rintz, examining the Dark Tower series.
Yes, I'm in the middle of, like, smack dab in the middle of listening to the entire series on audiobook, so I can have my shit together. You guys spiked this to a point. I thought I would have more time, but I didn't. So yeah, we're just I'm scrambling right now. That'll be hitting the feed here a little bit later this month.
Really good problem to have.
Yep. And then we're pretty close on the REM show as well.
Yeah. We're very close to that, which is fantastic. Really looking forward to doing that. I've been listening to albums in case that spikes up. And let's not forget a little show me and Jeremy Greer.
Oh, yeah.
Me and Jeremy Greer do called Days of Future Cast, which was our last premium show that kind of came through and has been going strong. The third episode dropped today. I want to say, or dropped recently at the very least.
Dropped yesterday, as of the time people are hearing this.
Yes. Yes. Dropped yesterday, and it is very, very fun. In that episode, we actually we take a brief break, I believe, to talk about the Pride of the X-Men thing. So
nice.
That weird little pilot from the 80s, if you've never seen that, it is amazing.
It was a pizza pilot. Yeah.
It is a pizza pilot. We talk about a pizza pilot. Personal pan pizza pilot project. Podcast. So that show is very, very fun. We just recorded an episode about the first X-Men film as well. So that's going to be your support on any of these new shows is very important. So if you do, we really appreciate it if you check them out. If you do like them, please rate and review them. Tell people about it, because that's very important early on in a podcast life.
Yes. So much of this, like we've grown so much even over the past 6 months. Yeah, kind of staggered. And part of that is due recently to a restructure on the Patreon goals. You've heard about that in the past. We put out that State of the Union where you could hear about that. All of those are active as of the 1st of November. So if you are curious about what you can get at a kind of a lower tier, go there and review all that stuff. See if supporting us on Patreon fits into your life in a way that makes sense. We try our best to make it worth your while. That is patreon.com/Duckfeed.tv.
Yeah, and to make this section go on for literally forever, the most germane of those goals is the Bonfireside Chat After Dark show that we're going to be doing. So yeah, we will have guests on that show, and that guest could be you. That is a Patreon goal. So that is going to be kind of a roundtable discussion of prompts submitted by listeners and patrons about the Souls series from Soft, various, and we'd entertain prompts from other things if somebody was like, tell me about something in your personal life that relates to this somehow, or whatever questions. But that's going to be something with. I'm really looking forward to doing that. That's going to be a show that comes out once every 3 months.
Yep.
And again, you could be part of it. So, yeah, I think that's probably it.
I think so.
Yeah, so next episode, we're hitting up the Archdragon Peak. After that, NPC Roundup, or actually after that, DLC.
Yeah, DLC. Yeah.
And then NPC Roundup and Endgame.
Yes. Really wish I knew when that last DLC was coming out. Kind of trying to plan my spring.
So what's going to happen for people who are listening, assuming that the DLC doesn't get like shadow dropped like in January? So we won't be able to do the DLC right after we do the last episode of this.
Right.
My thought, and you can put in a marker here, Kole, in case this is not your thought, that would be a good time to do some ancillary stuff to kind of kill time until it gets announced. So like one thing I want to do is cover that god awful comic.
Okay.
I feel like it's related. Like it's it's not like in canon, but it's related.
Yeah.
And people have asked us before whether we're doing it.
Yeah.
It might be also a good time to dig out a copy of the Bloodborne board game.
Yes.
Things like that. So like we might do some kind of killing time episodes, but just because of my separation of space neuroses, because what's going to happen if we don't do that, and could happen anyway, is we're going to cover like Salt and Sanctuary, and then right after Salt and Sanctuary, go back to Dark Souls 3, and then go into Momodora. So that's fine if we do that, but if we can not do that, that would be cool.
Yeah. And in the interest of honesty, also, it might be nice to have more time to play those games, because the off seasons of this show are almost always what we do is we go double time on Watch Out for Fireballs, is what that's like. So it would be good to avoid doing that.
Spacing in some kind of thing. So there'll be some kind of special episodes, things like that. We have some special episodes also in the tank that are kind of those top and bottom 10 episode kind of things. Those might leak out there as we need extra time to play, Salt or Dark Mouse or what have you, Neo, depending on how long those are. So it'll be a fun off season. The theming, we always do themes for the off season, and this is just the another season on the influence of Dark Souls, because 1,000 like Souls like games have kind of come out.
Yep. There's a bumper crop as of late.
Yeah, and they're all worth talking about. Even the ones I don't love have been worth talking about. I was kind of publicly disappointed with Salt and Sanctuary, but it's not because it's not interesting. It's an interesting game, and it'll be fun to talk about. And Cole's never played it.
I've never played it because I bought it on launch day and the interface was too small. It's my understanding that they put in an option to make it bigger. I hope so.
Yeah. Well, and it's, we were going to cover it for this eventually.
Yes.
So probably a good idea to
I would
hold
have
off.
had to move my chair.
Yeah. So until next time, Cole, what should they do?
Oh boy, they should sit here and watch the world not burn with us.
For that is our curse.
For that is our curse. Umbasa.
Umbasa.
And we all pray that we will have far more soon